Beginnings, colonization and the struggle for independence. The story of the United States begins with the first contact between Europeans and the American continent. The earliest arrivals were the Spanish, who began exploring the territories south of what is now the United States in the mid-15th century. However, it was the English who became the primary settlers of the eastern part of the continent. In 1607, the first permanent English colony, Jamestown, was established in Virginia. This marked the beginning of a wave of English settlements that would eventually lay the foundation for what would become the United States. Over the next decades, English colonists founded several colonies along the East Coast, while the French, Spanish, and Dutch also established their own settlements, leading to periodic territorial conflicts. By the 18th century, British colonies in the southeastern and southwestern parts of North America were thriving. The cultivation of tobacco, indigo, and rice required large amounts of labor, so the English began importing African slaves in large numbers. This became the foundation for the slave-driven economy in the southern colonies. In the 1770s, social, economic, and political tensions began to rise in the British colonies due to high taxes imposed by Britain to cover the costs of its war with France. Without representation in Parliament, colonists felt their rights were being violated. These tensions eventually led to the American Revolution in 1775. After years of fighting for independence, the British formally surrendered at Yorktown in 1781. On July 4, 1776, the Declaration of Independence was adopted, declaring the 13 colonies independent from Great Britain, forming a new government and the Constitution. After gaining independence, the former colonies faced challenges, economic, political, and social. The government created under the Articles of Confederation was weak, and the need for a stronger central authority became evident. In 1787, the U.S. Constitution was drafted, coming into effect in 1789. It established a strong federal government with 3 branches: executive, legislative, and judicial. The Bill of Rights, added shortly afterward, guaranteed basic individual freedoms. George Washington became the first president of the United States, and under his leadership, the country began to form a new political order based on democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. Expansion and Civil War. Throughout the 19th century, the United States continued to expand its territory. In 1803, the U.S. purchased the Louisiana Territory from France, nearly doubling the size of the nation. By the 1840s, driven by the idea of a manifest destiny, the U.S. aggressively expanded westward, acquiring new territories like Texas and California. However, this expansion raised the contentious issue of slavery. The southern states, where the economy depended on slave labor for plantations, sought to expand slavery into the new territories, while the northern states, where slavery had been abolished, opposed it. Tensions between the North and South eventually led to the American Civil War, 1861 to 1865. The conflict began after Southern states declared their independence and formed the Confederacy. The war was brutal, and it ended with the victory of the Union, the North, leading to the abolition of slavery and the beginning of Reconstruction, a process to reintegrate the Southern states into the Union. Industrialization, immigration, and global power. After the Civil War, the United States underwent rapid industrialization. Large cities on the east and west coasts became centers of industry, while railroads connected the vast expanse of the continent. This period also saw a massive influx of immigrants from Europe, fueling the growth of new communities and cultures. At the same time, the U.S. began to assert itself as a global power. In 1898, the country won the Spanish-American War, acquiring Cuba, the Philippines, Puerto Rico, and Guam, which extended its territory and political influence. In the 20th century, the United States became the world's leading economic and military power. Although the U.S. entered World War I late, its involvement helped secure the Allied victory in 1918. After the war, the U.S. experienced the Great Depression of the 1930s, but recovered through President Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal policies. World War II and the Cold War. World War II marked a turning point for the United States. After the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, the U.S. entered the war, contributing to the defeat of the Axis powers by 1945. Thanks to its economic and military resources, the U.S. emerged from the war as one of two global superpowers, along with the Soviet Union. The Cold War began shortly after World War II, a geopolitical struggle between the U.S. and the Soviet Union that lasted until the early 1990s. The U.S. led the Western Bloc, and many military conflicts, including those in Korea and Vietnam, became part of this larger ideological struggle. The U.S. in the late 20th and early 21st century. In the late 20th century, the United States remained a dominant force in the world. It played a key role in global economic organizations, such as the United Nations, NATO, and the World Trade Organization. In 2001, following the terrorist attacks on September 11, the U.S. launched the War on Terror, leading to invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq. This marked a challenging period for the country, leaving a lasting impact on its internal and external policies. The U.S. also experienced the 2008 financial crisis, which affected the global economy, but the country managed to recover quickly. In the 2010s, the U.S. faced new challenges, including increasing political polarization, social inequality, and debates over climate change and immigration policy.